The night was alive with neon and noise, the kind of city energy that makes the rich feel untouchable. A black luxury car sliced through traffic, its polished body gleaming under the skyscraper lights. From behind tinted windows emerged a man in a flawless suit, every inch the picture of power. He walked briskly, briefcase in hand, eyes fixed ahead. On the sidewalk, a frail woman in ragged clothes lifted her hand. "Please, a little help," she whispered. He didn't slow. He didn't even see her, at least not as human. His jaw tightened and he pressed on, the weight of his wealth in every step. Then chaos, tires screamed, metal shrieked. His car, not yet parked far away, spun out of control, slamming into a post, flames bursting into the night. And before anyone else moved, the same beggar woman ran toward the fire, toward him. The morning sun filters through the skyline, glinting off glass towers that seem to scrape the heavens. Inside the top floor of one of those towers sits Richard Hale, a man whose name alone can make boardrooms go silent. He is the kind of CEO people whisper about, decisive, brilliant, and ruthless in equal measure. His empire stretches across industries, his signature inked on contracts worth billions. Yet behind the polished veneer lies a man who measures his life not in relationships or memories, but in profit margins and quarterly reports. Richard's day begins before dawn, not with breakfast shared at a kitchen table, but with a personal driver idling at the curb and an assistant already briefing him on the phone. As the city stirs awake, he's already 2 meetings ahead. By the time most people sip their first coffee, Richard has sealed deals that will ripple across markets. To the outside world, it looks like success beyond imagination. But watch closely, and the cracks begin to show. In his corner office, a cathedral of glass and steel, he sits surrounded by luxury, yet entirely alone. Assistants come and go, board members nod obediently, and subordinates scramble to interpret his clipped words. There are no handshakes of warmth, only contracts. No shared laughter, only restrained nods. His phone buzzes constantly, but never with a call from family. His ex-wife's number is long deleted. His teenage son no longer answers his texts. The way Richard interacts with people says everything. To him, a waiter is a shadow, a cab driver is background noise, a beggar on the sidewalk an inconvenience. He doesn't snarl or insult. He simply doesn't see them. In Richard's world, people fall into 2 categories, useful or invisible. Yet even titans feel the weight of being human. Late at night, when the skyscraper's lights dim and only his office lamp remains, Richard leans back in his leather chair and rubs his temples. A prescription bottle hides in his desk drawer, filled with pills to regulate blood pressure climbing higher each quarter. A folder of medical reports sits unopened, buried beneath contracts he insists are more urgent. He has no one to confide in. His victories are celebrated in headlines, but his fears echo unheard in empty penthouses. And still every morning he slips into his tailored suit, adjusts his tie, and steps into the world as though nothing can touch him. He is untouchable, or so he believes. What Richard doesn't know is that life has a way of humbling even the mightiest. The walls he has built around himself, walls of wealth, power, and arrogance, are about to come crashing down. Because fate, as always, does not discriminate. On the opposite end of the city, just a few blocks away from the CEO's glass tower, another life unfolded in shadows most people preferred not to see. She was there almost every morning, stationed at the same corner where the traffic light forced cars to pause. Her clothes were a patchwork of seasons, an oversized coat layered above a faded dress, woolen gloves with the fingertips missing, a scarf frayed at its edges. The fabric carried the smell of rain and dust, as if her body itself had become part of the street. Her face was weathered, lines etched deep not by age alone, but by the merciless weight of hardship. And in her hands, often clutched as tightly as the cup she used to collect coins, was a small, worn photograph, a child with bright eyes and a smile unspoiled by the world. She hadn't always been this way. Years ago, she was a woman with routine, with dignity, with a paycheck that arrived predictably enough to cover rent and groceries. But then came the layoffs, the unexpected closing of a factory she had given 2 decades of her life to. At first, she fought. She polished her resume, knocked on doors, begged for interviews. But the rejections piled up faster than opportunities. Bills stacked on the kitchen counter until eviction became inevitable. Then came the personal tragedy she rarely allowed herself to think about for long, because each memory was a blade. The photograph was the only piece of that old world she carried with her, proof that once she had belonged somewhere. Now most people walked past her without a glance, their faces trained on their phones or the glowing crosswalk signal. To them, she was invisible, part of the city's clutter, a reminder of what they didn't want to acknowledge. Some scowled, muttering assumptions about laziness. Others dropped coins into her cup without ever meeting her eyes, as though kindness could be outsourced to gravity. And yet, despite the daily humiliation, there was a stubborn ember of humanity that refused to extinguish in her. She once tore her last piece of bread in half to share with a stray dog that had been circling nearby. When another homeless man, trembling with fever, collapsed beside the subway vent, she sat with him until an ambulance arrived, whispering comfort though she had none to spare for herself. Even when people cursed at her or children laughed at her tattered shoes, she responded with silence, sometimes even a faint smile, as though clinging to the belief that cruelty was not the sum of the world. The city might have stripped her of almost everything, shelter, security, respect, but it had not stripped her of kindness. And in that small, stubborn kindness lived a quiet kind of power, invisible to those who brushed past her. She was broken by circumstance, but not by spirit. She did not yet know that her path would soon collide with the man in the glass tower. Nor did he. But destiny had already begun to weave the threads that would bind them together. Her humanity and his emptiness, her invisibility and his prominence. The stage was being set for a reversal no one could have imagined. The glass doors of the corporate tower slid open with a hiss, releasing a gust of chilled air that smelled faintly of perfume and polished wood. The beggar woman stood just outside, leaning on her cane, her layered clothing drooping around her like faded curtains. In her hand, she clutched the same worn photograph, its edges curled, its surface smudged from years of being held too tightly. She spotted him instantly. The polished shoes, the sharp suit, the air of self-importance that seemed to move ahead of him like a shadow. He walked briskly, phone in hand, a man always in motion, always unreachable. She knew his type, men with the world at their feet, men who had forgotten how heavy it was to carry hunger in one's belly. As he passed, she lifted her head, her voice soft, almost apologetic. "Spare some change, sir." He didn't break stride. His eyes flicked over her in less than a second, as if she were just another crack in the sidewalk. His lips tightened, and under his breath he muttered, "Get a job." The words stung, sharper than a slap, not just because of what he said, but because of how easily he said it, like she was less than air. She lowered her gaze, fingers tightening around the photograph, her lips pressed together, holding back the 1,000 stories she could have told him, about the factory that shut down, the landlord who changed the locks, the child she once sang to sleep. But she had learned long ago that no one wanted the story. They only wanted to pass by quickly. He slid into his sleek car, the door closing with a muffled thud, shutting her out like the rest of the world. The glow of his phone lit up his face as he barked instructions to someone on the other end. A life of schedules and deadlines, untouched by hers. For him, the moment was already over, forgotten before the traffic light even turned green. For her, it lingered. The words clung to her like smoke. She sighed, her breath clouding in the cool air. For a moment, she looked down at the photograph again. The child's smile stared back, a reminder of why she kept standing there day after day. Her stomach ached with hunger, her bones with weariness, but she pushed the sting of humiliation aside. She had survived worse. She would survive this too. A stray dog padded over, ribs showing through its thin coat. She reached into the paper bag at her feet, tore off the smallest piece of bread, and bent down to share it. The dog wagged its tail, eyes softening in gratitude. She smiled faintly. In a world where so few spared her a glance, here was a creature who understood her language of scraps and kindness. Unseen, unremembered, she remained by the tower's entrance as his car pulled into traffic. He thought their encounter was nothing, but fate had already marked it as the beginning of everything. The CEO's sleek black sedan cut through the late afternoon traffic like a blade. His phone was still glued to his ear, his voice clipped and urgent as he barked orders to someone on the other end. The world outside, the desperate woman on the sidewalk, the restless crowds, the simmering August heat, had already vanished from his mind. His attention was money, deals, and deadlines. But fate had other plans. At the intersection, the light turned yellow. He pressed harder on the accelerator, unwilling to lose even a few seconds. From the opposite lane, a delivery truck barreled forward, the driver trying to beat the same light. Two lines of arrogance converged in a single instant. The collision was thunder. The world seemed to rupture. Metal shrieked as steel bent unnaturally, glass exploded into glittering shards, and the CEO's luxury sedan spun like a toy. Airbags burst open with a suffocating hiss, but not fast enough to shield him from the jolt. His head slammed against the frame, stars exploding in his vision. Then came silence, followed by the hiss of steam and the sinister crackle of fire. The sedan skidded across the asphalt, finally resting against a traffic pole. Flames licked greedily at the crumpled hood, feeding on leaking fuel. Smoke curled upward, black and heavy, choking the air. Inside, the CEO coughed violently, his lungs clawing for breath. He tugged at his seatbelt, but it was jammed, the mechanism warped in the crash. Panic rose sharp and merciless. His heart hammered in his chest. "Help, somebody help!" His voice broke, drowned by the chaos. On the sidewalks, people had already gathered. Phones rose like a forest of glowing rectangles. Some gasped, some whispered. A few shouted half-hearted warnings, "It's gonna blow," but no one moved forward. No one dared to step near the growing fire. And then, through the wall of spectators, she appeared. The beggar. Her tattered scarf flapped against the hot wind, her bag of meager belongings thudding to the pavement as she dropped it without hesitation. For a heartbeat, she stood still, her chest rising and falling rapidly, eyes fixed on the wreck. She saw the same flames, the same black smoke, the same danger everyone else did. But instead of fear rooting her in place, something else took over: resolve. She ran. Her sandals slapped against the asphalt as she darted between cars, weaving through the stalled traffic. The heat from the fire slapped her face, the acrid stench of burning fuel filling her nostrils, but she didn't stop. She reached the driver's side and yanked the handle. Nothing. The door was bent inward, twisted by the impact. She gritted her teeth and pulled again, harder this time, the metal scorching her palms. Inside, the CEO's eyes widened. Recognition flashed. This was the woman he had dismissed only moments ago. The irony seared deeper than the smoke in his lungs. "Get back," a man shouted from the sidewalk. "It's gonna explode." But she didn't listen. Planting her foot against the wreck, she leaned back and yanked with all her strength. Muscles screamed, skin burned, but the door groaned, shifting just an inch. The CEO thrashed against the seatbelt, coughing, eyes watering. He felt the flames creeping closer, the heat unbearable. She refused to give up. With a final, guttural cry, she forced the door wide enough to slip her arm inside. Her fingers fumbled against the buckle, blistered skin pressing metal until, with a sharp click, it released. She grabbed his arm, pulling with desperate strength. For a moment, the world was only fire, smoke, and the sound of her ragged breathing. And then, with one last heave, she dragged him out onto the pavement. The crowd erupted into shouts, shock, disbelief, awe, but she didn't hear them. She only heard his gasps, the frantic pounding of her own heart, and the roar of the flames behind them as the wreck groaned, threatening to collapse entirely. She had risked everything, and she had saved the man who, minutes ago, had tossed her dignity aside like trash. The car was an inferno now, flames crawling hungrily along the hood, smoke rolling upward in suffocating waves. The CEO clawed at the seatbelt lock, his fingers slick with sweat and blood, but it wouldn't budge. His lungs burned as he coughed violently, eyes stinging from the acrid smoke. Panic surged through him. He was trapped. Outside, the crowd grew larger. Some shouted, others recorded with their phones, their faces lit not by courage but by the flickering fire. A few took hesitant steps forward, only to retreat at the roar of another small explosion under the hood. Fear was stronger than their compassion. But not for her. The beggar dropped her ragged bag, spilling coins that rolled unnoticed across the pavement. With nothing but the raw impulse of humanity, she darted toward the wreckage. Her thin sandals slapped against the asphalt, her scarf flying loose behind her. Gasoline stung her nose, heat seared her skin, but she didn't falter. She found a brick by the curb and without hesitation raised it high. The first strike against the rear window bounced back with a dull crack. Her arms shook, but she swung again, harder, faster, desperate. On the third strike, the glass spiderwebbed, then burst inward with a shower of glittering shards. Smoke belched out through the opening, choking her. She pressed her mouth into her sleeve, eyes narrowed against the sting. Through the haze, she saw him, red-faced, coughing, his expensive suit torn, his hands clawing at the unyielding belt. His one-sprout expression was stripped away, leaving only terror. She didn't hesitate. She climbed halfway through the broken window, the jagged edges tearing at her clothes, biting into her arms. Reaching inside, she fumbled for the seatbelt. The lock was jammed, hot under her fingers. She pulled, twisted, slammed her palm against the release. Nothing. The CEO's frantic eyes locked with hers. He shook his head, choking out a hoarse plea. She ignored it. She yanked again, using all the strength her weary frame could muster. Finally, with a click that felt like thunder, the belt snapped free. "Come," she rasped, her voice rough with smoke. Hooking her arms under his, she pulled with every ounce of energy. He was heavier than she expected, dead weight from shock and injury. The flames popped louder now, licking closer, threatening to swallow them both. She gritted her teeth, her thin body trembling, and dragged him across the seat. They tumbled out together, hitting the rough pavement hard. The CEO gasped, sucking in fresh air like a drowning man. His coughs racked his chest, but he was alive. Alive because of her. The crowd surged closer now, they're all mingled with guilt. Some dropped their phones, rushing to help pull him farther from the blaze. Others stared at the beggar, disbelief etched on their faces. For the first time, his eyes found hers without glass or metal between them. They were wide, almost childlike, stripped of arrogance. She met his gaze, her own eyes fierce yet trembling, filled with a quiet fire stronger than the one consuming the car. For a heartbeat, the world shrank to just the two of them, the fallen king and the forgotten woman who had saved him. The wail of sirens cut through the stunned silence. Red and blue lights painted the night as paramedics rushed in, shoving through the gawking crowd. The beggar coughed violently, her thin frame racked with spasms. Black smoke stained her lips. She staggered once, twice, then collapsed onto the asphalt, her body trembling with exhaustion. The CEO, still on his knees, reached out instinctively. His manicured hand, trembling and bloodied, brushed against hers. It was the first time in his life he had ever looked at someone like her, not as a nuisance, not as invisible, but as something beyond priceless. The crowd whispered. The cameras, still rolling, now captured not just the wreck but the reversal of roles. She was the hero, he was the one who owed his life. The beeping of monitors filled the sterile hospital room, steady and impersonal. The CEO lay back on the crisp white sheets, an IV drip threading life back into his bruised and battered body. He closed his eyes, trying to process the chaos of the past hour. The screaming tires, the explosion of glass, the roar of flames, and then her. Her hands, rough and scarred, had reached through jagged shards of glass, unflinching in the face of fire, pulling him from the jaws of death. In his lifetime, he had faced boardroom battles, hostile takeovers, financial crises, but never had he confronted the raw, uncompromising courage of someone who had nothing to lose yet risked everything. Images replayed behind his eyelids, the thin, trembling arms bracing against burning metal, the determination in her smoke-streaked eyes, the way she had ignored the screams of bystanders who had chosen fear over action. And the memory that cut deeper than the physical pain, the memory of how he had brushed past her only moments before, dismissive, arrogant, blind to her existence. Shame washed over him, hot and inescapable. His chest tightened as he realized how small, how shallow his life had felt despite wealth, power, and accolades. He had spent decades chasing recognition, yet here was someone whose life was far more fragile, and whose actions had shown him what recognition truly meant. In the hallway, reporters buzzed, their cameras capturing every detail. A photograph of her, the beggar woman, now labeled simply as Hero of the Day, flashed across screens nationwide. Headlines proclaimed her bravery. Homeless woman rescues CEO from fiery crash. Life over status, courage in the face of fire. When questioned, she spoke with quiet dignity, her voice firm yet humble. Life is precious. I couldn't just stand there. The simplicity of her words struck him harder than the crash itself. No mention of fame, no expectations, no desire for reward, just an unwavering belief in doing the right thing. The CEO's hands curled into fists on the blanket covering his legs. He had been blind to the humanity around him, measuring worth in dollars and influence, and yet here she was, a stranger from the streets, showing him the measure of true courage. Visitors came and went, bringing flowers, small gifts, and whispered congratulations. Each gesture highlighted the stark contrast between his life of luxury and her life of struggle. And yet, it was she who commanded the attention, not because of wealth, but because of integrity. For the first time in years, he saw clearly. The world he had built, the corner offices, the towering skyscrapers, the endless schedules, felt hollow compared to the raw, undeniable truth of her bravery. A quiet vow formed in his mind. He would never view life or people the same way again. Even the nurses, impressed by her daring, murmured in awe. Most people would have run, one whispered. She didn't hesitate. He nodded silently, the weight of gratitude and humility pressing down like a stone he had long ignored. The awakening wasn't just physical recovery. It was moral, emotional, and spiritual. She had pulled him from the fire, yes, but more importantly, she had pulled him from his own arrogance, opening his eyes to the humanity he had long dismissed. In that moment, the CEO understood. Survival wasn't just about escaping the flames outside. It was about the courage to see, acknowledge, and honor the bravery of others, no matter their place in the world. And she had shown him exactly what that meant. By morning, the story had spread like wildfire. Social media feeds were alive with clips of the daring rescue, the frail, tattered woman pulling a luxury car's occupant from the fire, coughing and shaking yet unyielding. Headlines across news outlets screamed in disbelief and admiration. Homeless woman saves CEO in fiery crash. Courage knows no wealth. Life over status. Heroine in the streets. The CEO, still bandaged and bruised, sat in a quiet office far from the cameras. But he wasn't thinking about deals or profits. His mind replayed every detail of her courage, the way she had risked her life without hesitation, and the shame of moments before when he had ignored her pleas. Determination replaced guilt. He would act. He called in her caseworker, arranging immediate medical care. Her burns were treated, her exhaustion eased, and a safe place to rest was provided. But the CEO didn't stop there. He knew that healing wasn't just physical. She needed stability, dignity, and a chance to rebuild the life fate had stripped away. Donations began pouring in almost immediately. From local citizens inspired by the viral footage, to businesses offering temporary work, to anonymous benefactors pledging support for housing. The woman, overwhelmed by the sudden outpouring, simply nodded and whispered, "I just did what anyone would." But the CEO knew differently. He had witnessed courage and integrity in its purest form. Moved by her bravery, he launched a foundation in her name, the Courage Fund, dedicated to supporting the homeless, providing emergency care, and offering opportunities for education and employment. Her act became more than a singular moment. It became a movement, a testament to the idea that heroism and compassion are not dictated by wealth or status. Within his own company, subtle changes began to emerge. The CEO started greeting employees he had previously overlooked, listening genuinely during meetings, and engaging with janitors, receptionists, and staff whose faces often blended into the background. He made time for mentorship, personal interactions, and small gestures of acknowledgement that rippled across the office culture. What had once been a world ruled by hierarchy and indifference was beginning to feel humane, attentive, and compassionate. Meanwhile, she became a symbol of quiet resilience. Local schools invited her to speak about courage, kindness, and the importance of standing up when others won't. Strangers approached her not to patronize but to learn from her example. A child asked, wide-eyed, "Were you really brave enough to go into the fire?" She simply smiled, coughing lightly, and said, "Bravery isn't about strength, it's about doing what's right when it matters." Back in the office, the CEO reflected on the unexpected lesson of the day. The beggar woman, someone he had dismissed, someone society had ignored, had not only saved his life but reminded him of the values he had buried under years of ambition and detachment. Integrity, courage, and compassion, these were the true measures of worth. Word spread and the ripple effect grew. Other companies donated to the foundation, inspired by her story. Employees volunteered, communities organized drives, and more than one person was moved to act kindly toward strangers in need. A single, selfless act had begun to transform lives far beyond the immediate rescue. The CEO watched her being interviewed on national television, her voice calm and humble despite the limelight. Tears welled in his eyes, not for his survival, but for the realization that one human being's courage could ignite an entire community, shift a culture, and change a heart hardened by wealth and power. It was a lesson in humility, a reminder that the simplest acts, offering help when it's not convenient, risking comfort for the sake of another, carry power that can't be calculated in dollars or influence. One life saved had led to countless others being touched, inspired, and uplifted. Her bravery had planted seeds of compassion everywhere she went. The CEO had learned that leadership wasn't about control. It was about noticing, valuing, and acting with humanity. And the world, for just a moment, felt a little kinder because of it. Weeks passed, and the city seemed quieter yet somehow more alive. For the CEO, life no longer revolved solely around boardroom victories, quarterly profits, and endless meetings. The crash had cracked something deep within him, revealing the fragility of life, the weight of human connection, and the blind arrogance that had ruled his days. He began visiting local shelters, walking among people whose lives had been pushed to society's margins. For the first time, he listened, truly listened, to their struggles, their hopes, their quiet acts of courage that often went unnoticed. He met mothers juggling multiple jobs, veterans haunted by war, and men and women who had once had everything and lost it. Each encounter reminded him of the beggar woman who had saved his life, her bravery now a living standard he aspired to embody. Meanwhile, the woman, once nameless and invisible, began to reclaim her life. With safe housing secured, medical care complete, and financial stability ensured, she could breathe. Slowly, she reached out to her estranged child, repairing the bond that life's hardships had fractured. Her smiles returned, small and tentative at first, but growing warmer with each day. Friends and strangers alike were amazed to see her resilience, the same courage that had rescued a CEO, now fueling the rebuilding of her own family. Their paths crossed again, intentionally this time. The CEO arranged a private meeting, not as a benefactor to a beneficiary, but as two human beings connected by extraordinary circumstance. She walked into the office, steady and dignified, and he rose to greet her, not with words of pity, but with genuine respect. "Your courage saved me," he said simply. She nodded, her voice calm yet firm. "And it reminded you what really matters." No romantic sparks flared, no false sentimentality. Instead, an unspoken understanding passed between them, a recognition that life's true victories are measured not in wealth, but in integrity, compassion, and the courage to act when it counts. The CEO's company, inspired by the story, began programs to help marginalized communities. Employees volunteered, funded initiatives, and engaged with neighbors who society often overlooked. His own leadership style transformed. He remembered to greet the janitor by name, to pause in meetings, to celebrate acts of kindness among his staff. Authority was no longer about dominance. It was about empathy. For her part, the woman embraced opportunity without arrogance. She participated in community programs, mentoring others who had faced hardship, showing them that courage and humility are not mutually exclusive. Her story became a beacon, a symbol that anyone, regardless of circumstance, can make an immeasurable difference in the lives of others. Yet what remained most profound was their shared humanity. The woman who had risked everything to save a life had given the CEO far more than survival. She had given him perspective, the reminder that wealth cannot substitute for heart, that status cannot replace empathy, and that true power lies in noticing, valuing, and acting for others. In private moments, the CEO would reflect on the fire, the crash, the chaos, and he would smile quietly, thinking of her courage, remembering how one person's integrity had transformed not just a moment, but an entire life. The beggar woman, now living with stability and purpose, had reclaimed her dignity. The CEO, now transformed in heart and action, had gained more than he could have imagined. Together, though their worlds remained different, they shared a bond forged in fire, humility, and courage. A reminder that transformation often begins in the most unexpected ways, between the seemingly invisible and the untouchable. For both, life had changed, and yet the lesson endured. Bravery, kindness, and integrity are the forces that truly alter destiny. Wealth and power can often blind us to the simple, quiet truths of life, the struggles, the courage, and the humanity that exist all around us. The CEO, surrounded by luxury, status, and influence, thought he understood the world. But life has a way of humbling even the most untouchable. That day, a beggar woman, overlooked by almost everyone, became a force of unimaginable courage. Minutes after he ignored her plea, she risked everything to pull him from a burning car. Smoke, flames, and chaos surrounded them, yet she acted without hesitation. It was not fearlessness born of strength, but courage born of empathy, compassion, and the unwavering belief that a life, any life, is worth saving. Her heroism was more than a moment of bravery, it was a mirror. It reflected what truly matters, what wealth cannot buy: integrity, humility, and the ability to act when it counts. In saving him, she reminded him, and all of us, that human dignity and courage know no status, no rank, no title. The CEO's transformation began in that instant. The arrogance of power gave way to empathy. The rush of ambition softened into consideration. And in this reversal of roles, the invisible saving the influential, he learned a truth deeper than any business lesson. The smallest, most overlooked among us often hold the power to change lives. The beggar woman didn't just pull him from the wreckage. She pulled him back to humanity, back to values that wealth can never instill. And in doing so, she inspired a ripple of kindness, humility, and change that spread far beyond that single street corner. Universal moral: true worth is not measured by money, titles, or status. It is measured by compassion, courage, and the choice to act selflessly, even when unnoticed. Every life, no matter how humble, carries the power to transform the world around it.